But the fascinating thing to me was I talking to the insurance carriers and the negotiators on the insurance carrier side. They're trying to negotiate with the criminal. They've said these companies that I'm talking to, because I was like, negotiating, who are you negotiating with? How's that? And they said, MJ, these are large companies with hundreds of employees. They have an HR department. They have a C-suite. They have lunchrooms. They got the whole thing. You would think this was Intel or something. I mean, these folks, who knows, they're in Belarus or wherever, and they're it's run like a business. It's run like an absolute business. And so you're negotiating your cyber extortion.
Welcome to Business Battles Force Multiplier. I'm the founder and your host, Rich Robertson. I'm also the CEO of Computer Enhancement Systems located in Frederick, Maryland. No company is shielded from cyber hacking, large or small, it doesn't matter. You may ask, do I really need cyber insurance? I'm with you on this question. And that's why today I have a special guest with me who is a longtime friend and a cybersecurity insurance expert. My buddy MJ Hermes, Senior Vice President of McGriff. How you doing, MJ?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to our discussion.
MJ, before I start firing a bunch of questions at you, I want to explain what happened to one of my clients, where my clients almost transferred $1.5 million to a hacker, and they thought it was legitimate. And so let me get into how my client got hacked first. Somebody in my client's office clicked on a link. They got an email stating that they have to update their Microsoft password. And so they clicked on the link, and this is what they saw. It looks like a regular Microsoft login. Everybody sees this. Okay.
Right.
But the problem is, if you look up top, Microsoft is spelled with two R's. So this is what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack. So clicking through, they're thinking they're on the right page. They go to sign in. So they get signed in. This is a normal screen you'll see after you sign into a Microsoft O365 email account. Again, if you look up top, it has two R's. They're still on the hacker's webpage. So they enter the password, and once they enter the password, now the hacker has the username and the password. So they have multi-factor authentication. So it goes to his phone. Of course, he gets the MFA request on his phone, and he enters in the MFA number 35. All is good. He still thinks he's doing well, but he's not. He's still on the hacker's webpage. So once they get logged in, this is the screen that he sees. You see, it's been a full circle now from the original login to getting the MFA code. And you're going to see why in a minute. So when they get logged in, they're in the Microsoft screen. This is what the Microsoft screen looks like on a normal email login. So they're there. They think they're there.
Right.
Because as you can see, they're still on the hacker's webpage. So that's how they got access to the employee's account. At this point, they can see all the contacts. They can intercept all the mail coming in and out. They can divert mail. They can do anything they want. The reason why they can log in and access the user's mail anytime they want to is because they've stolen tokens. And the tokens, as I just said, is your security key. They now have possession of that. Once they can take that information, put it in their browser, and now log in as you without even have to use two-factor authentication. It just logs them right in. It bypasses everything because they got the full token. This is the email my client received. I'm going to call them King. So somebody named Jacob sent King an email. So we received a very large check payment in your account yesterday. The reason why they're saying that is because the hacker already knows that this company sent $1.5 million to their vendor's account. So they said, we received a very large check payment in our account yesterday, and it's currently being reviewed by our bank, so we are not accepting any payment in it for now. Please, we would like this payment be sent to our subsidiary account. Cat, okay, Cat works for this vendor, will send you a revised wiring instructions for this payment shortly. So they're trying to divert the payment to them, even though the vendor's already been paid. And so you can see it's a legitimate email address, has a logo, has a company logo, everything. It looks legitimate. But if you notice down here, the domain name is spelled FIED, which is the correct spelling. If you go up here and look, the domain name is spelled FEID. If you looked at Cat's email, it's also wrong. It's FEID. Keep in mind, my client has been working with Cat. She does not know who Jacob is. So in order for them to pull this off, they would have to go like GoDaddy and register this domain name with the wrong spelling. Obviously they did, because that's the only way they can send an email to you if they have a domain name registered and the email activated, which is called the MX record. So in other words, like my domain name is cesitservice.com. That's my domain name. My email is that. My webpage is that. So everybody can find me off my domain name. And I registered that a long time ago through Network Solutions. So anybody can go to GoDaddy or something like that and register any domain name they want. In fact, I even got my own domain name with my name, richrobertson.com. So that's how simple it is. So when they misspelled, and they do this all the time, just like they did the Microsoft page, the first Microsoft page with the 2 R's, they registered that domain name, that Microsoft domain name, to get that web page. Same way.
Right.
So this is why everything looks legit, except you have to pay attention to the spelling.
Yeah, we had, Rich, we've seen numerous, probably over the last 3 years, I bet I've seen 10 similar man in the middle, I think you're calling it, type of scenarios like this, where they misspell it slightly. I just heard of one Monday where they changed a Q to a G, a G to a Q. And, you're not really paying attention. You're looking pretty quick. A Q and a lowercase g, they look pretty similar.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing. And if you move fast and not really thinking about the fact that you're being asked to send a large payment or change a large payment or change a routing, they'll get you.
So, MJ, if this was my client, would they gotten paid for their loss?
Yeah. Classic questions for insurance. Will I get paid? And the answer is always the same, which you're not going to like. It depends. Depends on what you bought, how much you bought. I say that somewhat flippantly, but it's real. I mean, as we'll see, as you and I talk through this, the world of cyber insurance is becoming incredibly complex, and which is in a way is good, because you've got a lot of options, but in a way is bad because it's very complicated and hard to understand, and the difference between funds transfer fraud and computer fraud is not going to be obvious to hardly anybody. But you have to understand the difference to be able to figure out, do I want to pay extra or get a higher limit for that or whatever. So but the scenario that you brought up, which is by far the most frequent that I see, and that we see locally here at the McGriff office that I work at, is a classic social engineering scenario. So our employee was being socially engineered. Social engineering scenarios or claims, the limits on those, and that's why I said it depends. You're talking about $1.5 million. It is highly unlikely that they had social engineering limits of $1.5 million. Even if they really did a nice job and had a good, insurance policy and really went through things with the insurance carrier and with their agent, they maybe had 500,000, most likely 250,000 or 100,000. So social engineering is one of those that is hard to get a large limit on. And the answer, well, why is that? Well, it's obvious, because it's happening all the time, and the insurance carrier doesn't want to give you a large limit on that. And it involves an employee, and it involves an employee understanding what's happening. Your employee was fortunate, or your client's employee was savvy enough and had probably been trained enough that they asked questions, and they started going down that path of, gee, this just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, because I guess you have it broken down as social, the payoff as social engineering, because the employee is involved, and there's some sense of responsibility, I guess, correct?
Right. Yeah. So the social engineering is, the way I think of it, is your employee got fooled. You were tricked, and so in this case, they would have been fooled into sending a wire to the wrong address, to the wrong people, to the thief. So you were involved in the process. So that's why it's social engineering.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, it's only up to a certain limit, like you said, maybe
Correct.
500K or something like that. Okay.
Yep.
And it's not very much.
No. And again, that's because it's happening so much, and because it's the carrier doesn't want to expose themselves to a very, very large limit that is essentially employee determined. I mean, we can talk about some of the liability sides of this, but Rich, you're far more adept at explaining the protections of a network. But those protections are sophisticated protections. That doesn't mean you can't get through them, but the employee that's not a sophisticated protection. That's a matter of, have they been trained? Do they kind of understand what they're looking for? And so insurance carriers do not want to stick $1 million or $2 or $3 or $4 million limit out there and trusting that ABC company is going to train their employees appropriately, and that all those employees aren't going to click.
Yeah, well, 85% of the ransomware attacks are from the employee. Started with the employee.
Yeah, absolutely. They're almost all in social engineering. In addition to ransomware, social engineering and all of those types of things. And maybe we'll talk about the reverse social engineering here, invoice manipulation. But yeah, those are all, somebody's getting fooled, and you're man in the middle where the criminal gets into the network and just watches and waits for the appropriate time. And then depending on whether you're sending a payment or whether you're getting a payment, they tweak the emails back and forth, and they're either fooling you, your employee, or they're fooling, the client, the vendor's employee. And then of course, if it's the vendor's employee, that's the invoice manipulation. So that's yet a separate coverage.
Why don't you go and explain that? Let's get into that.
On the invoice manipulation side, so the social engineering we talked about a little bit, and actually let's dig into a little bit more social engineering, because you talked about a case where we were wiring money to a vendor. Okay, so that's one way of social engineering. You could also be wiring money to a client, and
that's right.
Remarkably, it happens.
That'd be a problem.
Yeah, remarkably, it happens with, the CEO, sends an email. Hey, I'm in a meeting. It looks like we're going to get this contract. All we got to do is pay the initial $100,000 to such and such. Can you wire the money? And I'm headed back into the meeting, so don't try to call me or whatever. They'll make it sound professional.
Yeah, anything urgent.
And urgent. It's got to be done right now. It's got to be done right away. Please wire it. And you'd be surprised how many, what I would consider a sophisticated client, falls for that. Because they were sitting on the network. They watched for the last month. They know everybody that's involved. They know all the players. They know all the names. They know everything that's happening. And so now they can step right in there. One of the other things that happens, and again, it's social engineering, is, let's say you're a distributor. Computer distributor, and your salespeople get a email that says, again, they're in the middle. They've been watching for a long time. They know the names and everything. Hey, you sent us the 100 laptops last month. We're loving them. It's fantastic. We need another 100. Oh, but don't send it to the address you sent last time. We got a different warehouse, or we got a different office building that we're just opening. We got a bunch of people we're moving over there. Send it to that location. And so the sales guy says, fantastic. I just sold another 100 computers, and they fire them out, and, then follow it up with an invoice later. And the client comes back and says, we didn't order an extra 100. And of course, they go to the location and nobody's there anymore. They were dropped off. People collected them. Computers are gone. And who knows? You were probably one of 10 people that got fooled with that same scam. And so they've taken the computer. So there's several different types of social engineering. And then there's the reverse social or invoice manipulation, because you're sending out an invoice to somebody to pay you. And so it's the opposite. We're not sending a payment. We're sending an invoice and being asked to be paid for our work. And so now the man in the middle watches what's going on and stops your invoice and sends a fake invoice with a different routing number and says, here's the invoice for the services, blah, blah, blah. And they might do this for a month, for 2 months, whatever, until you reach out to your client and say, hey, we haven't been paid for a while.
Wow.
What's going on? And they say, well, we've been paying you every month. What do you mean? And it's just one of those things that they just never checked. And wow. So let me go to that, because I just, we're talking about insurance and insurance claims here, but the last thing you really want to do is make an insurance claim. I mean, whether it's workers' compensation, auto insurance, doesn't matter what it is. You don't want to do that. You want to stop it before it gets to the claim. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at first talk about how can I stop this from happening? And so we talked a little bit about training, and that's critical, and obviously protections. And I'm not even going to go down that road, because Rich, you're the right person there to talk about what kind of network protections are we doing. But the training, the planning, disaster planning and that kind of stuff, and then the network protections, you got to do that first, because you don't want to go down this path of having a claim. Maybe you have coverage, maybe you don't, maybe you have sufficient limit, maybe you don't, but you don't want to go down that path. You prefer to.
Yeah, but unfortunately, MJ, you can't people-proof anything. No matter how hard I tried over the years, you cannot people-proof.
No, you're right.
So what we do, we send out phishing training on a regular basis, usually once a quarter. And if the user clicks on a link that they shouldn't have, then they're forced to go through the training. If not, we step up the emails to a different level, higher level, and we send them out again. And so, and I have to tell you, it used to be fairly easy to recognize a phishing email. It's getting harder and harder because these hackers are using AI to write the email, and they look so legitimate. Then on top of that, we got the firewall, which is your router, and we got to put filtering on the router. And so that's pretty expensive per year. And then on top of that, you have to, as we talked about, two MFA, two-factor authentication, everything, that's a revolving expense.
Right.
And then on top of that, we have to have threat protection software on all the systems. And the newer threat protection software that we use, the way virus protection worked is that when a file hits your machine, it will review the file and then compare that file name or that file structure with a known blacklist of files, saying that if that file's on a blacklist, it's a virus. And then that's how they quarantine it. Today's threat protection software will take and scan the file and look for patterns, malicious patterns in the file. And if that file has malicious pattern, then they'll quarantine it and shut it down. And we're constantly getting alerts of malicious files that have been quarantined from our clients. I mean, we don't do all files have been quarantined, but the real very malicious ones we do, and we're constantly getting alerts. Everybody's just getting hammered with that, and that's where it starts. Then on top of that, you have to have some type of malware protection that does the pop-up blocking. So when you go to a malicious website, it blocks that pop-up and doesn't allow you to click on that. And I said this before, but I'm going to do this again. Microsoft will not call you. And Microsoft does not want you calling them. They do not have people sitting behind the phone waiting for your phone call to service you. It's not happening. Okay. So when you get that pop up, the 800 number that says, this is Microsoft, give us a call, do not call that number. Call somebody local. But and really the first thing you should do is hit that power button, hold that power button for like 5 seconds and shut that thing completely down. Even if you get those real loud, malicious pop-ups and files that are screaming at you, hit that power button, shut it down. Even though it's telling you not to shut the PC, shut the PC down.
Shut it down.
Nothing's going to happen to it, I promise you. And so, and I challenge anybody to find me Microsoft's phone number in Redmond, Washington. Find me it, because you're not going to find it. I promise you. They don't want you calling. And same with HP, all of them. You won't find the tech support numbers. You'll find these scammers that, even though their website says HP and they got the HP logo, it is not HP. I promise you that. I'm telling you, a couple of times a week, we're getting computers in here where somebody lets somebody in their machine. Do not let anybody in your computer, in your system, unless you know who they are, personally know who they are. Just don't do it. While they're talking to you on the phone and you let them into your system, they are uploading, downloading files behind the scenes that you cannot see, but they're doing it. And then when you hang up with them and they say they uninstalled their software, they did not uninstall the software. It's still on the system. So do not let anybody, if you don't know them personally, enter your system. I don't care who they say they are. And so, as I said, we get a couple machines in a week like that where they have all kinds of backdoor viruses and backdoor ways of getting back into your system and uploading files and stuff like that. When somebody's email gets compromised or somebody's computer gets compromised, they're sitting in there trying to get across the network. And once they get across the network and get some administrative rights, then they're going to unleash what they need to do, your ransomware or anything else. And they're also talking about phishing. Once they get into a system or get into somebody's email, they're looking for the CEOs and the vice presidents, and they're targeting them because they're the ones passing important information along. And that's why they're targets. And that's why I had the CEO in it. They already had the CEO's email in there as well to verify everything. And that's how they knew what was going on, because they're seeing all the correspondence from them and the vendors. And they knew when they were going to get paid and everything else and when to drop. So yeah, they're sitting in there and they're trying to get across your network. When I say across the network, I'm talking to every machine, to the servers, anywhere they can get to shut your network down and release attack.
Yeah, that was a lunchtime conversation today. Several folks, we're talking about different things, but somehow cyber insurance came up and cyber risk, and it is amazing how sophisticated they are and how much things have changed. It used to be we were only worried about data. We were concerned, and we still should be. I mean, depending on what data you have on your system and that kind of thing. But that was the primary concern. They would get in there, they'd steal your data, and they'd threaten to release it and extort you, or they'd release it, and then you'd have to deal with the ramifications of that and the PR nightmare or whatever. And now they get into your network and they sit there and they learn and they learn and they learn until they figure out, okay, what can I do? Where's the vulnerability here where I can get in to the middle of this and end up with an opportunity to fake somebody out. And it tends to mostly be of late this social engineering and invoice manipulation type of thing.
Yeah, and that goes into my next question. I mean, there's a ton of small businesses, and I have some clients who have small businesses. Do they really need cyber insurance? I mean, are they really going to be vulnerable? And can they afford that?
Well, yeah, affordability is all in the eye of the beholder, but I think the answer is yes, they do need it, and it is affordable. Cyber insurance went through, with software as a service ransomware of 3 and 4 years ago during COVID, particularly, it exploded, and cyber insurance exploded. I mean, the application exploded. It used to be that an application for cyber insurance 7-8 years ago was a one pager with just a few questions, mainly involved around how many computers do you have, what kind of data do you have, how many records do you have of maybe personal data, that kind of thing. And now it's 14 pages of application because there's a lot of questions they want to know, not just about what data you have, but what kind of protections you have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions that your client doesn't know, but they pencil whip the check boxes anyway.
Yeah.
What's the liability in that?
Absolutely. We always recommend that when you're filling out those applications, I mean, if you look at them, they're painful. Absolutely need to have either your in-house IT person, or if you're with Computer Enhancements or whoever it is, that the person who's in charge of your network and putting the firewalls in place and all of the software protection in place, that's the person that needs to be helping you fill out that application, because it needs to be accurate. Typically, Rich, those applications are not warranties. There are some insurance policies where the application itself becomes a part of the insurance policy, so that there's, the insurance carrier is telling you, we're relying on these answers to be correct. And if they're not, coverage may not be there. That's not typically the way it is, but in terms of, the pencil whipping, they certainly, you're going to sign the bottom of that application. And this is one of those situations where read what you're signing before you sign it. What does it say above that signature line? But most of the time it's just they're relying on that information, but it would have to be a fraud situation or instance where you pencil whipped it, or you purposely lied about, yes, I have MFA for all VPNs, and no, you do not. And you knew that you didn't, because you just told your IT folks last week that you're not going to pay the $50,000 or whatever it costs to get that, so we're not doing it. And so in that case, you didn't tell the truth, and if there's a lot of zeros on that claim, the carrier could certainly decline it. So yeah, we're back to whether something is paid or not. Back to your where we started this little bunny trail. It really depends on what was purchased, and you take time and make sure that you've analyzed what are our exposures as best you can, and the insurance carriers, while I'm on that, insurance carriers are one of the nice things these days is they do want to help. I mean, first of all, they don't want to pay $1 million claim or $250,000 claim for that matter. You might only be paying $15,000 for your insurance policy. They certainly don't want to pay $250,000. Take them a long time to get that money back. So they can be very helpful in helping you to get the right coverages and the right protections in place, working with your IT team.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, let's say somebody said they had firewall filtering, they had 2MFA, and they don't have it, and they got social engineered, to say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're saying that there's a chance that when there's an investigation, a review, and they find out, the insurance company finds out they don't have it, they could be denied the claim, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in insurance policies, fraud is always a potential out for the insurance carrier. I mean, they have to prove fraud, so it'd be challenging. If it's a $25,000 claim, they're not even going to go down that bunny trail. They're not going to try to prove fraud. But if it's $250,000, or somehow you have $1 million or multi-million-dollar limit, and well, for social engineering that would be unusual, but liability you could. Have a multi-million-dollar limit, and so then that's enough zeros that they might want to figure out, was fraud committed here or not.
But you keep using the word fraud, but not to the fraud where a sense where I'm thinking from my law enforcement career. Fraud's a criminal act. There can be charged criminally for it. You're talking about the word loosely with
Yeah.
fraud, being that that's enough because there's fraud here. That's enough not to
Yeah.
what's the word I want?
To
Ex-
deny the claim. Yeah,
yeah,
there might be enough there to deny, and at least it would be a battle, and you don't want that. I mean, if you're going up against Chubb or somebody, their attorneys are very well paid, so you don't want to go down that path. You want to make sure that you've answered the application appropriately. And again, the carriers are my experience has been, the good carriers, the good agents, nobody wants a claim. So they're trying to do the right things. And we've had several instances where everything wasn't exactly what they wanted, and point detections and everything weren't all exactly what they wanted. But the carrier said, "Here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and put the policy in place, and as soon as you get these in place, we'll increase the limit from 250 to 500,000, or 250 to a million, or we'll decrease the deductible from 100,000 to 25,000 because you now have these in place." So they want to work with you, and they want to try to piece this together and do the right thing. So you're better off always fill it out as best you can. Get your IT people in there. Make sure that they're answering the questions that if it's a CFO, they're not going to know the answer to 80% of those questions. You're going to have to get someone who's truly the network and IT people involved. And they'll help you not just early on. The carriers we've seen, been real interested in providing assistance to you. We've got a couple of carriers that give you an hour with someone who does, who specializes in the forensics, the after the fact claim situation, and give you an hour with them to help you evaluate where am I? How am I doing? Am I good? What should I improve? What is my risk? And talk through those types of things. What kind of limits should I have, etc.
Now you brought up social engineering, reverse engineering, and liability. What other types of insurance should we have to be covered under?
So let me if I could, let me share this screen real quickly here, because I mentioned that that the industry has matured, if you will, or changed quite a bit. If you looked at this is an actual client's declaration page from their professional liability / cyber policy. If you looked at these things a while ago, and a cyber policy, this is a tech client, and I would always recommend with a tech client, you want your errors and omissions and your cyber liability on the same policy. So in this case, they do. They have $10 million limit for both of those. But it used to be that's all you had. That was all you were worried about. And now you've got this personal injury. Did I defame somebody? You've got media and content. Oops, I didn't draw that very straight, did I? Media and content liability, which is, when they hacked in and got something, did they get something that somebody else had a copyright to, or intellectual property or whatever, and we released it. So now you've got some liability there. So those are some new liability sides. And you've got fines and defense. Now, in this particular case, this client doesn't feel like they need that coverage. So that's the liability side, this top section. If we go to the bottom section here, you'll see this is where a lot of the changing and maturity has happened over the past, especially the last 4 or 5 years, Rich. I mean, this has really changed quickly. Where again, a few years ago, all you would have maybe was this one and this one. Where now we got to get into the system, and we got to figure out what happened and fix it. Software wise, hardware wise, what do we have to restore? All the forensics and that kind of thing. So that you had, and then along came all the extortion.
Okay, so just
go ahead.
For the audio listeners,
You sure?
What you highlight was security breach notification and remediation, data and systems restoration.
Right.
That's the recovery portion. That's you got $1 million there, and cyber extortion. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the next one that was sort of added along the lines was cyber extortion. Okay, now that again we talked about that, the ransomware. Now you got to pay me $250,000 or $300,000, or else I'm either releasing your data or I'm not going to let you get to it or whatever. And that's where it gets to, Rich, all that stuff you talked about with the backups and making sure you've got everything appropriately stored and disaster plan and all of that kind of thing.
So am I hearing you correctly? So if a company gets ransomware and the ransomware people say, okay, I need $400,000 in Bitcoin. This is $500,000 limitation. So you would pay the $400,000. Insurance would pay the $400,000.
Yes, minus the $25,000 retention.
Sign me up.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing: we've had a couple of these over the last few years. Not only are they, there's a lot of that goes into this. And a lot of times law enforcement will get involved as well to determine whether you should pay it or not. But the fascinating thing to me was I talking to the insurance carriers and the negotiators on the insurance carrier side. They're trying to negotiate with the criminal. They've said these companies that I'm talking to, because I was like, negotiating, who are you negotiating with? How's that? And they said, MJ, these are large companies with hundreds of employees. They have an HR department. They have a C-suite. They have lunchrooms. They got the whole thing. You would think this was Intel or something. I mean, these folks, who knows, they're in Belarus or wherever, and they're it's run like a business. It's run like an absolute business, and so you're negotiating your cyber extortion.
I had this client that it was almost 2 years ago, I guess now. It was during COVID.
Right.
And I only sell certain brands of Intel servers. Well, this client was demanding to put a new server in, and so we're making it limp along because during the COVID, you just couldn't get parts.
Right.
You could not get parts. And so he ended up going to one of my competitors because I don't sell Dell, period. And Dell's, my competitor could get some Dells. So he sold them Dells, okay? And so, and we had a program on that server that gives external access. It's kind of like a cloud type of program. So they put that new server in, and everything was going, everything's fine. So of course I wasn't talking to the client at all, unless he called and needed help with that program. Well, about a year and a half, almost a year and a half after that server was in place, he called me up at the program, and so I was making some suggestions to him. He said, well, I want to do that. I'm not paying $27,000 again to get my data back. I'm like, what? Yeah, the company that sold me the Dell, 2 months after the Dell was in, I got hacked. I got ransomware, and I had to pay $27,000. And they told me that somebody clicked on something. Yeah, somebody clicked on something. I don't think so, because their security was horrible. I can tell you how they got hacked, and it wasn't because somebody clicked on something. But yeah, so it's gone from 7,000 to 27,000 now. And it's expensive.
Man, we've seen it quite a bit higher than that, hundreds of thousands.
I'm sure you have.
Bitcoin.
Yeah,
it's getting crazy.
But it was a small business.
Right.
That's why. That's about the max they could get out of this guy because he was a small business. And that's why I said in my intro, it doesn't matter if you got a small business or a large business. They're coming after you. They're thinking anything, a nickel out of you, they're coming after you.
Yeah, again, if you were only looking at liability, it used to be you had the conversation with the client, and they'd say, well, I don't have any data, that anybody wants, or any that has personal identifiable information, or where medical protected data.
They don't want it, but you want it.
but yeah, so they don't have any data. But now the criminal says, I don't care if you don't have data. I don't really care about that. You do have things that you need to use your computers for. And one of them is sending and receiving invoices. And, I'm going to, take that away from you, or I'm going to get in the middle there and make you pay for it.
I didn't mean to digress on you, but
no, that's fine.
The next line was business income and loss and extra expense.
Yeah. So this is one that, again, a few years ago, we didn't even think about this, but it makes sense. Okay, now your system is down. Something happened. got some liabilities, maybe. You've got some maybe extortion that you had to pay. You've got some restoration and remediation costs. What about, did you lose any income because of this? And depending on who you are and what you do, you may very well have lost some income. For instance, you're a federal government contractor, but you work through a prime. Pick the prime, Northrop Grumman. We'll pick on them. And something happens to your system, you get hacked, it impacts Northrop Grumman or impacts their ability to work with the contracting officer, the DOD, or whoever they're working with. You don't think Northrop Grumman's coming after you? You don't think they're going to be upset about something? And so you might lose, first of all, they might come after you, and then you need these up here, the cyber and security liability, $10 million. They also might come after you, and you might lose your contract. So now you've lost business income, you've lost income because of this. And maybe you have a bunch of additional expense. One of the things that this client is looking at is this other one now. Okay, so this is yet another thing we've thought about here of the last couple of years. What if it's not me that was hacked, but it's my client that was hacked? And because they were hacked or because their system was shut down, I'm dependent on them for work, or it's a vendor or supplier, and I'm dependent on them for chips, for equipment, whatever it may be, and I can't get it now. And now I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you just highlight contingent business income loss and extra expense. So
Yeah.
you're saying if this client is, let's say, 65 or 70% of my revenues, that's what this is for.
Well, yes, it could be if it's a big part of your revenue, or if they supply something to you that if they don't get it to you, you ordered a bunch of servers and they went down, and so their manufacturing is completely shut down because of a cyber issue, and now you can't get it. And like you said, your client might go to a competitor because it's going to take you 2 months now to get the servers that you ordered. So you might have a claim for contingent business income.
Okay, so next one you got funds transferred fraud.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of a bunny tail we want to go down here, but these are two crimes: funds transfer fraud and computer fraud. So those are small. Those are smaller. Those are harder to get because now we're getting into really crime. So they've started to add a fair amount of crime, and this particular policy doesn't have all of it. But computer fraud is somebody hacks into our system, steals my access for my bank and my PIN, and transfers money from my account to somebody else's account. So that's computer fraud. Funds transfer fraud is they did the same thing. They just didn't use a computer to do it. They sent a fax. They sent an email, or I guess the email would be computer, so maybe that wouldn't be work. But anyway, you get what I mean. They handed a piece of paper to the bank teller, whatever. And so they've got you to transfer money. And so that's where that comes into play.
Now, is there any insurance that will pay the fine of the compliance?
Yep. Yeah. And that is going to be on this particular policy. That's in this first security breach notification. That's for your fine. And then, again, in this case, this client said they didn't want to do it. This fines and penalties and regulatory defense for your client, for somebody that you caused damage to. So if somebody else had to pay fines and penalties because of your hack, because of your breach, then you're liable to that third party, and that's where that would come in. So yes, fines and penalties should, again, depending on the state, depending on all kinds of things, that there potentially is coverage for both of those.
Okay, MJ, tell me something as a business owner purchasing insurance that you wouldn't want me to know. Give me some inside baseball about the insurance industry and coverages and stuff like that. That I would say wouldn't want me to know, but stuff that you don't promote or publicize.
Well, I guess one inside baseball would be that there are a lot of carriers and agents that sell cyber insurance that they're just dabbling. And this is true of almost any kind of insurance. I mean, if you insure contractors, then you know all about contractors insurance and equipment insurance and all of that sort of thing. You know the ins and outs of that. If you sell a lot of cyber insurance, you know the ins and outs of the cyber insurance, where to go and where not to go. I guess the inside baseball would be they're not all the same. They're not all the carriers are not the same, all the coverages are not the same, and all the agents are not the same. And you need to find somebody who really knows, they're an expert or not, I don't know, but you don't want somebody who just dabbles in it. I sell homeowners insurance and auto insurance. Oh, and I also sell some. Yes, I can get access to cyber for your business. Sure, I can find that because again, it's incredibly complicated as we're walking through, and we're just tip of the iceberg during this.
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of me starting this, business battles, because we've been friends for a long time. You know how long I've been struggling, and and I've had some success too.
Mm-hmm.
But man, there's been times that I'm like, I just need a mentor, or ask somebody, hey, another peer of mine, how'd you do this, or how'd you get through this? And this is what I want to do. I want to share this kind of information and how I persevered over the years for people who are coming across the same type of situations. And
Sure.
This is very helpful because this is one of the challenges we have, because we have to, oh man, I got to buy another insurance policy. It is not cheap, and the overhead is getting outrageous because all the recurring expenses that we have now,
Mm-hmm.
it's getting harder and harder, and so you clarified everything very well. You answered questions well. I have a full understanding of it now, and I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it.
God, can't thank you enough for having me on, Rich. Really appreciate it. I knew it was going to be a good conversation, and sure it was.
Great.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. As I said, I appreciate everybody watching. I'm going to also post MJ's email address. Of course, mine's up there. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, any questions that you have. We're trying to do podcasts once a month. If you want a podcast on a particular subject, just send me an email and we'll fire them up. And please don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button as well. Well, thank you for watching.
Produced by Podcast Architects.